When my husband discovered that I couldn't inherit any of my father's assets, he erupted in rage. "What do you mean you can't inherit anything?" he screamed. "If that's the case, I have no use for you anymore. I want a divorce right now." His words cut deep, and in that moment, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Soon after, I exacted my revenge on both my husband and my sister, who had swiftly married each other. My name is Flo, a 32-year-old office worker. I married George, whom I met through a relative 2 years ago. My family, though once wealthy, faced uncertainty over who would inherit since we were all daughters. George was introduced to me as a suitable match who could potentially join our family. After our wedding, George moved in with me at my parents' house, where we lived with my father after my mother passed away. Initially, George seemed kind and respectful towards my father, earning everyone's trust. However, just before our marriage, the relative who introduced us warned me about George's obsession with money. Despite this, I didn't notice any signs of greed in him and proceeded with the marriage. As time went on, George began subtly probing about my father's assets during casual conversations over drinks. My father, being open-hearted, didn't seem bothered by George's curiosity, which momentarily eased my concerns. George's interest also extended to my younger sister, who was lively and outgoing, a stark contrast to my own calm demeanor. Her beauty and charm fascinated him, a fact that didn't escape my notice, stirring up conflicting emotions within me. The relative's concern was rooted in the fear that without me, a plain and unassuming daughter, there would be no one to inherit the family's wealth if something were to happen. I initially thought there was no reason to worry, believing my beautiful sister would secure our family's future. However, it soon became clear why that relative had concerns. My father, always lenient with my sister, allowed her to pursue higher education after high school, including a vocational school after college. Unlike me, she didn't have a specific career goal. Rather, she seemed averse to working. While my mother insisted she find a job right after college, my father disagreed, enabling her to attend vocational school. After completing it, she landed a job at a company owned by a friend of my father's but quit after just 6 months. I was astonished by her reasoning for quitting. "I couldn't show my full potential at that company," she claimed. My mother and I were baffled by her confidence despite her short stint. Nevertheless, my father believed her and swiftly arranged for her to join another company. Soon after, when our mother fell ill and was hospitalized, my sister visited daily, often skipping work. Eventually, she quit again, proclaiming she would care for our mother. However, her idea of caregiving involved idle chatter or smartphone scrolling in the hospital waiting room. I found myself solely responsible for handling our mother's laundry at the hospital and ensuring she had fresh clothes, as my sister offered little help. Though our mother initially enjoyed my sister's company, her condition deteriorated within a month to where conversation became impossible. 2 weeks after this decline, she passed away. Both my father and sister were so devastated that I had to organize the funeral arrangements. Thankfully, our relatives stepped in, and we were able to give our mother a proper farewell. After her death, my sister started working part-time and moved out of our parents' house to live independently. However, her earnings weren't enough to cover expenses, so our father began paying her rent and utilities. It seemed she spent her money frivolously and frequently asked our father for more. While our mother was alive, she had been strict with my sister, so our father didn't provide financial support initially. Yet after her passing, he gave her free rein with money. I didn't see any issue with this arrangement if both my father and sister were content. Even after I married and moved in with my husband at my parents' house, my father continued supporting my sister financially. Unbeknownst to me at the time, my sister was also asking my husband for money, which he readily gave, asking her to keep it secret from me, fearing my reaction. My sister sustained herself with sporadic part-time work and funds from our father and my husband. However, this lifestyle became unsustainable when our father fell ill and required hospitalization. I juggled hospital visits between work and caring for our father, but my sister never appeared at the hospital. Instead, she began calling me, demanding money. "Since I've been getting money from Dad every month, I need you to continue that," she demanded. "The rent and utilities are all paid from Dad's account anyway." Her angry tone surprised me, hearing this for the first time. Despite my anger at her disregard for our hospitalized father, I resisted hanging up, sensing she might be in trouble. How much are you getting from Dad every month? I asked, trying to gauge the situation. You need to find a job soon and support yourself. In a grumpy tone, she replied, I was getting $1,000 every month, not including rent. I was stunned by her casual admission. Seeing my adult sister receiving such a substantial allowance, I worried she had no incentive to find work. At first, I didn't see it as a problem, assuming our father would recover soon. However, his condition suddenly deteriorated, prompting me to contact our relatives urgently. The doctor's serious prognosis left me deeply shocked. During such a difficult time, I hoped for support from my husband, but he claimed to be busy with work and rarely visited the hospital. When he did come, his questions were insensitive. Your father's inheritance must be substantial, right? Since it's just you two sisters, you'll split it evenly, he remarked, fixated on the inheritance. I was speechless, realizing my husband's obsession with money, a trait my relatives had warned me about. It left me feeling disgusted. Even when my sister called and I explained our father's critical condition, her concern was solely about money. Forget that, just make sure you send me my monthly allowance. I can't survive without it, she insisted before abruptly ending the call. I was furious with her selfishness, yet worried about a faint male voice I overheard in the background, triggering a sense of unease. A month later, our father passed away, but neither my sister nor my husband were present during his final moments. As I dealt with the funeral arrangements, memories of my mother's funeral weighed heavily on me. To worsen matters, neither my husband nor sister offered any help. My sister didn't even attend the funeral, and though my husband showed up briefly, he quickly left, citing work obligations. Even the relative who introduced us noticed his absence and asked about it. What happened to your husband? It's odd for him to be absent, they remarked. All I could manage was a bitter smile in response. He's busy with work, had to head home, I explained, feeling disappointment welling up inside. After the funeral, as I finally caught my breath, my husband approached with a grin. Finally, how much did you inherit? It must be quite a sum, even if split, he asked eagerly. As warned by my relative before our marriage, it seemed my husband's thoughts were consumed by my father's inheritance. Disappointed, I responded casually, my sister gets $100 million, and I get nothing. I hadn't spoken to my lawyer yet, and with the funeral just behind us, I hadn't sorted out my feelings either. My husband, gleeful about the inheritance, provoked me to the brink of laughter beyond anger. Upon hearing my words, my husband erupted, What? You can't inherit anything. If that's true, I have no use for you anymore. Let's get a divorce right now. Feeling the same way, I retorted, Let's do it. You married me for my father's inheritance in the first place, didn't you? I'll divorce you. With that declaration, I thrust the divorce papers I had prepared towards him. He seemed taken aback, but signed them nonetheless, as if he had expected this outcome. As he finished signing, my ex-husband remarked bitterly before leaving, I'll divorce you, who has no inheritance, and marry your sister Emily to get the $100 million. Undeterred, I promptly filed the divorce papers. Breaking free from my scoundrel of a husband felt liberating. The next day, it seemed my ex-husband had already filed for marriage with my sister Emily. A few days later, he called me, still convinced of his delusion. When are you going to start the inheritance procedures? Give Emily the $100 million as soon as possible, he yelled into the phone. I waited patiently for the call from my ex-husband, refusing to initiate contact myself after he left the house on his own. When his call finally came, I answered in a matter-of-fact tone. Let's discuss it at my place this Sunday. I'll be prepared for the proceedings, I informed him calmly. My ex-husband, believing he was about to receive a windfall, was elated and quickly hung up the phone. Little did he know, I eagerly anticipated the moment he would learn the truth. Over the weekend, both my ex-husband and my sister arrived at my parents' house, visibly surprised to find a lawyer waiting there. Despite their initial shock, my ex-husband attempted to maintain composure. I knew it. You need a lawyer when there's a fortune involved, he remarked smugly. However, the lawyer interjected with a puzzled expression. Before we address the inheritance, there's a matter of property division your ex-wife has claimed against you, the lawyer explained, beginning to display a series of photographs. The photos depicted my ex-husband leaving my sister's house, each one clearly dated. The lawyer continued, addressing my ex-husband directly. These photos serve as evidence of your affair before the divorce was finalized. Therefore, you'll need to comply with the property division. My ex-husband's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief as the reality of his actions sank in. Upon overhearing my ex-husband discussing the inheritance with my sister over the phone, I promptly instructed my lawyer to investigate his infidelity. Despite the solemnity of my father's funeral, my ex-husband and sister met frequently at her house, unaware I was gathering substantial evidence. When the conversation shifted from inheritance to their affair, both were caught off guard. Initially stunned, my ex-husband quickly composed himself and argued back. Property division is trivial compared to the $100 million inheritance. I'll settle it immediately, he retorted arrogantly. However, when the lawyer presented the documents, he signed them without hesitation. I made sure to remind him pointedly, enjoy your life with my sister, who inherits nothing. Since you signed, I'll ensure the property division is collected. Upon hearing she would receive nothing, my sister erupted in disbelief. What? Why is my inheritance zero? I'm supposed to get $100 million, she cried out. My ex-husband, now red-faced, joined in, yelling, there's no way. There has to be an inheritance. I won't let you take it all. The lawyer calmly intervened, beginning to explain the situation to the infuriated pair. Emily is actually the biological child of her late mother from a previous relationship. She was never legally adopted by Shlo's late father, so there is no legal parent-child relationship that would entitle Emily to inherit. Turning to my sister, who appeared bewildered, the lawyer continued, when our parents remarried, you were about 1 year old. I was 6 and clearly remember how happy I was to suddenly have a sister. The revelation sank in slowly as the truth of the situation became clear to both my ex-husband and sister, their anger dissipating into stunned silence. I never imagined my own sister would betray me by stealing my husband. When our parents remarried, they had already been burdened with young children from previous relationships. They believed in balancing their affection and attention between us. My mother treated me as her own daughter, showering me with love, while my father cherished my sister, perhaps indulging her more because she wasn't his biological child. Despite the family dynamics, my mother never adopted my sister, a decision that raised suspicions among relatives who were aware of my father's considerable wealth. They often recommended me for marriage, knowing I was the sole inheritor of my father's assets. If my parents had had children together, the situation might have become even more complicated. However, they deliberately chose not to, likely to avoid future inheritance disputes. Now, I understand that my father financially supported my sister throughout her adult life because he couldn't leave her an inheritance. Legally, neither my sister nor I were officially adopted by our respective parents, but that never mattered to us. We grew up together as siblings, unaware of the legal nuances until now. It seems our parents never disclosed to my sister that they had both remarried before, and today was the first time she learned the truth about our family's complex history. I wondered if my ex-husband grasped the gravity of the situation as his face transitioned from flushed to pale. Not only was he denied the inheritance he expected from my sister, but he was also faced with a property division for which he had already signed the documents. With a pallid expression, he turned to me and asked, "Was it all a lie? You said $100 million for your sister and nothing for me." Suppressing a laugh, I replied, "Of course it was a lie. It was payback for your affair. Besides, my father's inheritance was nowhere near $100 million. My normally quiet sister suddenly exclaimed, "I've been shopping so much, expecting Dad's inheritance. What about the money Dad was giving me? Will you cover it, sis? You're married and have George to support you now, right?" She looked at my ex-husband, who was visibly shaken. However, he shook his head and said, "I can't afford that. I spent expecting the inheritance, and now with the property division, I'm stretched thin." After saying this, my ex-husband unexpectedly knelt before me, apologizing profusely. "Tilo, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. Can we please get back together?" The lawyer, who had been packing up, chuckled at the sight. "Where did that arrogant attitude go?" he remarked. "George pleading on his knees like this is quite the turnaround." After the discussion, my ex-husband and sister left dejectedly, and they soon divorced. My ex-husband, who had remarried with hopes of inheriting my sister's fortune, lost interest in her when she received nothing. He was adamant about the property division and his inability to support my sister. Since he had no assets, I decided he would pay from his monthly salary, as advised by my lawyer, to ensure I received what was due. Meanwhile, my sister, no longer supported by her father, struggled to make ends meet with part-time work. Eventually, her debts piled up, leading her to file for bankruptcy. She moved out of her apartment, and I lost track of her whereabouts. My father's excessive support had hindered her ability to work seriously, and although relatives began suggesting potential suitors for me, I declined. I didn't want another man like my ex-husband. This time, I intended to find a partner on my own terms.
Hey, I'm Anna. My life changed a lot 5 years into my marriage with Paul. We were a regular couple. I was a teacher. He worked as a manager at an energy company, and everything was pretty simple. Then Paul's dad passed away, leaving his mom Elaine alone in their family house. That's when Paul hit me with a bombshell. "Anna, we need to talk," he said seriously one night. I paused, looking up from my phone. "What's up? Is everything okay?" He took a deep breath and said, "It's about Mom. She's alone in that old house since Dad passed. I think we should move in with her." My stomach dropped. "Move in with Elaine? You know we barely get along," I protested. Paul leaned against the kitchen counter, firm in his expression. "I know, but she's my mom, and she's struggling. Plus, we're just burning money on this rented apartment." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "But this is our space, our home. Moving in with your mom is a whole different ballgame." Paul pleaded, "Please, Anna. It's not just about the space. It's about family. Mom needs us." I felt cornered. "Does your mom need us, or do you need your mom?" I asked. Paul frowned. "That's not fair, Anna. It's not like I'm asking you to live in a dump. It's a huge house, plenty of room for all of us." Tension rose as I questioned our life there. But eventually, I caved for the sake of peace. Moving day was uncomfortable. Elaine's house was this imposing old structure with echoing rooms and a constant chill. Elaine greeted us with a stiff smile, saying, "Welcome to my home. I expect you to respect my ways." I forced a smile, saying, "Of course, Elaine. We appreciate you letting us stay." Living with Elaine felt like living with a hawk. She had a comment for everything: how to put dishes away, how much to water the plants. One night, after a particularly harsh critique on my cooking, I exploded to Paul in our room. "I can't do a damn thing right for your mother. It's like living with a drill sergeant." Paul rubbed his temples, equally frustrated. "Anna, just give it time. She's old and set in her ways." I threw my hands up in frustration. "Great, so we just tiptoe around her till the end of time." He didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. This house, with its constant surveillance and Elaine's scrutinizing eyes, was suffocating. Life in Elaine's house was turning into a daily grind. Just when I thought I could handle it, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I was trying to find some peace in the garden when he came out. "Anna, we need to talk," Paul said, leaning on the garden gate. I looked up, feeling a knot in my stomach. "What now, Paul?" He took a deep breath. "I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a fortune on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It makes more sense." I stood up, anger rising. "Quit my job, Paul. I love teaching. It's not just about the money." He ran his hand through his hair, his tone getting edgy. "I know, but think about it. It'll make things easier around here." I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. "So what? I just become a full-time maid and nurse? That's not the life I want." Paul's voice rose. "It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. My mom needs us." I glared at him. "No, your mom needs you. I didn't sign up to be her caretaker." He shot back. "Well, things change, Anna. We need to adapt." The word adapt felt like a slap. I loved my job, my independence. This wasn't adapting. This was sacrificing. "You know what, Paul? Fine, I'll do it, but don't expect me to be happy about it." He sighed, a look of relief crossing his face. "Thank you, Anna. It means a lot." But it didn't feel like a victory. Quitting my job felt like losing a part of myself. The days that followed were even harder. I had become a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine, as always, had her 2 cents to add about everything. "Those curtains need a wash," she'd say, or "the soup is too salty." It was endless. One day, I snapped. Elaine was criticizing the way I ironed her clothes, and I couldn't take it anymore. "Elaine, can you just stop?" "I'm doing my best here," I said, feeling frustrated. She looked taken aback. "Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna." I threw the iron down, my voice shaking. "I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I'm here trying to help, and all you do is criticize me." There was a moment of tense silence, and then Elaine's expression softened slightly. "I know you're trying, Anna. I'm just used to things a certain way." I sighed, feeling the tension drain out of me. "I know, Elaine, but I'm not you. I have my way of doing things." From that day on, things were slightly better. Elaine toned down her criticisms, and I tried to accommodate her quirks. It was a fragile truce, but it was better than the constant battles. As time dragged on in Elaine's house, the atmosphere grew tenser, almost suffocating. Paul's behavior became increasingly distant and elusive. He was consistently late from work, and when he was home, it was as if he was invisible, retreating to the spare room like it was his sanctuary. One evening, unable to bear the silence and distance any longer, I cornered him in the kitchen. "Paul, what's going on with you? You're hardly here, and when you are, it's like you're not even my husband anymore," I said, leaning against the counter with my arms folded. He'd avoided eye contact, absent-mindedly stirring his coffee. "Work's a nightmare right now, Anna. Just piles of stress," he replied. I leaned back, still concerned. "I get stressed, Paul, but this feels like you're shutting me out. You're here, but you're not really here." He exhaled heavily, his gaze fixed on his coffee. "I don't know what you want me to say, Anna. I'm just really tied up with stuff." I wanted to believe him, to understand, but something inside me screamed that there was more to it than he let on. Then there was Lucy, Paul's sister, who made it her mission to add to the tension. Each visit from her was a trial. She'd look around the house with a sneer and quip, "Still stuck in this old dump, pa." I usually bit my tongue, but one day her taunts hit a nerve. "Not all of us have the luxury to mooch off others, Lucy," I shot back. She cackled, her voice grating on my nerves. "Oh, look at you playing the martyr in a haunted house. Pathetic." I clenched my jaw, holding back a barrage of words. Paul, ever the silent bystander, offered no defense. His silence was like another jab, another confirmation of the growing gulf between us. The biggest shift, however, came with Elaine one day. She called for Lucy, her voice frail and desperate. "Lucy, I need help with a bath. I can't manage on my own anymore." Lucy's response was cold and cutting. "Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker." Elaine broke down in tears, and despite our rocky history, I couldn't leave her in that state. I assisted Elaine with the bath, and something changed between us that day. Elaine started to warm up to me, treating me less like an intruder and more like a daughter. It was a welcome change, but it also emphasized how far Paul and I had drifted apart. Despite Elaine's newfound warmth, the house felt colder and emptier. The walls seemed to echo with a growing silence between Paul and me, a chasm widening with each passing day. The chill in our home grew colder as Paul's late nights at work became the norm, and our conversations turned into mere whispers of their former selves. During one of these fleeting interactions, Paul dropped a bombshell that added to the growing pile of secrets and lies. "Anna, I got an apartment near work," he said nonchalantly, as if discussing the weather. I almost dropped the dish I was cleaning. "An apartment? Why on earth would you need that?" He leaned against the doorframe, avoiding my gaze. "It's just practical, Anna. Saves me the commute, especially with the late nights." Anger and confusion surged within me. "And you just decided this without talking to me? What? Are we roommates now?" He shrugged, his indifference cutting deep. "I thought you'd be happy, less stress about me coming home late." I shook my head in disbelief. "Happy, Paul? This feels like you're living a double life. What's next? You'll tell me you have a second family?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's not like that." I wanted to push further, to break through his nonchalant facade, but I knew it was futile. The conversation ended there, as did many of our conversations those days. The true shock came a few days later in a candid conversation with Elaine. We were in the living room, sharing a rare moment of calm when she suddenly said, "You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his money." I looked at her puzzled. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then continued, "He used my savings. He said it was an investment, even put it in my name." My heart sank. "He's been using your money, and you're okay with this?" Elaine shrugged, a sad look in her eyes. I couldn't say no. He's my son. But I thought you should know. I was speechless. Paul's secret apartment was one thing, but using his mother's savings under the guise of an investment felt like the man I married was slipping away, replaced by this stranger with secrets and lies. A few days later, I confronted Paul about it. "Why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money?" He was unapologetic, almost defiant. "Because I knew you'd react like this. It's an investment, Anna, not a big deal." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Not a big deal. You're gambling with your mom's savings and keeping it from me. What else are you hiding?" He turned away, ending the conversation with a dismissive wave. "You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business." The word business felt like a chasm between us, an excuse for everything going wrong in our marriage. Living in Elaine's old, dreary house was taking its toll on me. The once vibrant walls now echoed a somber tone, and every creaking floorboard seemed to whisper secrets. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. "Elaine, have you ever thought about renovating the house?" I asked over breakfast. "It could use some freshening up." Elaine looked up from her tea, surprised. "Renovate? I haven't thought about it in years. It's such a big task." I nodded, feeling a spark of enthusiasm. "I know, but it could really brighten up the place. Maybe just start with a new coat of paint or some new wallpaper." Elaine considered it for a moment. "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to bring some new life into this old house. But are you sure you're up for it?" I smiled, eager for a project. "Absolutely. It'll be a good change." And so it began. I threw myself into the renovation, painting walls, choosing wallpapers, and even attempting to restore some of the old furniture. It was hard work, but it felt good, like I was breathing life back into the house and, in a way, into myself. One day, while I was up to my elbows in paint, Paul walked in. He looked around, his expression one of shock and disbelief. "What the hell, Anna? What are you doing to my mom's house?" I stood up, wiping the sweat from my brow. "I'm renovating, Paul, like I told Elaine. It's time this place got a little love and care." Paul's face hardened. "You had no right to start changing things without asking me. This is my family home, not some DIY project." My temper rose. "Your home? When was the last time you even cared about this place, Paul? I'm doing something good here." He took a step closer, his voice rising. "You're overstepping, Anna. You always do this. Take control and push everyone else aside." I stared at him incredulously. "Take control, Paul? I'm trying to make this gloomy place livable. Maybe if you spent more time here, you'd see that." Before Paul could retort, Elaine walked in. "What's all this noise about?" Paul turned to her. "Mom, did you know about this? About her changing the house?" Elaine looked from me to Paul, then back again. "Yes, I did, and I'm glad she's doing it. This house needed a change, and Anna's doing a wonderful job." Paul looked like he'd been slapped. "But it's our family home?" Elaine cut him off, her tone firm. "It's my home, Paul, and I want this. Anna has every right to do what she's doing." Paul stormed out of the room, leaving me and Elaine in an awkward silence. I felt a mix of victory and sadness. The house was transforming, but the gap between Paul and me seemed to only grow wider. The day Elaine suffered her stroke, our world turned upside down. I was there, witnessing her sudden decline, her words slurring, her body weakening. Panic gripped me as I called for help, my voice quivering with fear. In the hospital, the grim reality set in. Elaine needed constant care. I looked to Paul for support, but he was distant, his eyes void of the usual concern. "Anna, I can't deal with this. I have enough on my plate, he said, his voice cold. I was stunned. You can't deal with this, Paul. She's your mother. He shrugged, his response cutting like a knife. Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top. I couldn't hide my disgust. She's not a burden, Paul. She's family. She needs us. His laugh was bitter. Us? No, Anna. She needs you. I've got other things to handle. I was left speechless, my respect for him sinking. I took it upon myself to care for Elaine. It was hard watching the once strong woman confined to a bed, dependent for every little thing. As I became Elaine's primary caregiver, Paul's visits grew rarer, and his indifference more apparent. His visits were short, his conversations with Elaine brief and superficial. Then Lucy came. I overheard them in the living room, their words like venom. We should start thinking about the will, dividing the assets, Lucy said, her voice devoid of any emotion. I burst into the room, fury coursing through my veins. How can you be so heartless, discussing her will right in front of her? She's still here. Lucy smirked, her words sharp. Oh, look who's talking, the saintly daughter-in-law. This is our family's matter. Stay out of it. Paul chimed in, his voice laced with cynicism. Anna, just drop it. It's practical to plan these things. No use pretending she's going to bounce back. I was aghast at his cruelty. Practical. She's your mother, Paul. How can you be so callous? He shrugged, his reply cold and detached. Life's callous, Anna. Better get used to it. I turned away, my heart heavy with disgust. In the following weeks, I dedicated myself to Elaine's recovery. And to my surprise, she showed signs of improvement. Her fingers twitched, her speech cleared. She even managed a few steps. It was a miracle to me, but a nuisance to Paul and Lucy. Their true colors were now vividly clear. Their mother's plight was nothing more than an inconvenience, a hurdle in their path of inheritance. The betrayal stung deep, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a human being. Life had settled into a grim routine. Elaine's health was a constant roller coaster, with small victories overshadowed by the looming fear of the worst. Then it happened. Another stroke, this time more severe. The call from the hospital felt like a punch to the gut. Elaine didn't make it. The funeral was a somber affair. I stood beside the grave, my heart heavy, watching as people paid their respects. That's when Paul arrived, and with him, a woman I didn't recognize and two small kids clinging to her hands. Who's she? I whispered to myself, my eyes fixed on the unfamiliar woman. Paul approached, his expression unreadable. Anna, this is Carol, my wife, and these are our kids. I felt like I had been slapped. Your wife. When did this happen? He shrugged, a coldness in his voice. A while ago. It's none of your business, Anna. I was speechless, my mind reeling. How could he? And during all this time with Elaine, Lucy was there too, her usual sneer in place. Finally showing your true colors, Anna? Playing the grieving daughter-in-law. It's a bit late for that. I glared at her, my voice laced with contempt. I was here for Elaine when you both abandoned her. Don't you dare judge me, Paul interjected. Let's just get this over with. We have other matters to discuss. After the funeral ended and the gathering moved to Elaine's house for the will reading, Paul and Lucy were like vultures, eagerly awaiting their share. The lawyer began reading the will, and that's when the bombshell dropped. Everything, the house, the money, all of it was left to me. Paul's face went from smug to shocked. What the hell? This can't be right. Lucy was fuming. She was our mother. How could she leave everything to this nobody? I stood there stunned, not sure how to feel. Happy. Vindicated. It all felt hollow. Paul turned to me, his voice filled with accusation. You manipulated her, didn't you? Turned her against us. I shook my head, disbelief and anger mixing in my voice. I did nothing but care for her, which is more than I can say for you. The lawyer intervened. Elaine was very clear in her will. Lucy was seething. This is not the end. We'll contest this. There's no way we're letting her get away with this. As they left in a huff, I stood there alone in the house that was now legally mine, the walls that had witnessed so much pain, betrayal, and love. I looked around, feeling the weight of Elaine's last act of kindness and the burden of a broken family. The house felt different now, like it was echoing with Elaine's last wishes. I was sitting there, holding the will, still trying to get my head around everything. Elaine had left it all to me, and Paul and Lucy were raging mad about it. They came back the next day, all fired up. "You really think you can just take everything?" Paul burst out as soon as he stepped in. I looked up, tired but standing my ground. "Elaine decided this, Paul. It was her choice." Lucy was red in the face, yelling, "You tricked a sick old lady. We won't let you get away with this." I stood up, fed up with their nonsense. Tricked. I was there for her, unlike you two. She chose to leave it to me. Paul was fuming. "So you think you've beaten us? You think you can just snatch everything away?" I let out a heavy sigh. "I didn't snatch anything, Paul. Elaine gave it to me because she knew I actually cared." Their yelling didn't stop, but it was just noise against the truth I knew. I was there for Elaine when they weren't. The lawyer showed up with a video Elaine had made. Her voice filled the room, and she said it clear as day. "I left everything to Anna because she was like the daughter I never had. She was there when my own kids weren't. She deserves it all." The room went quiet. Paul looked like he had been punched in the gut, and Lucy started crying, finally realizing what they had done. After that, Paul and Lucy left, and all their threats just fell flat. I was alone in the big house, surrounded by the past and thinking about the future. I decided to divorce Paul. It was tough, but it had to be done. He and his new family had to move to a rental place. Lucy had her own mess to deal with. Her debts and bad choices were catching up to her. As for me, I was standing in my new house, feeling sad but also kind of excited. Elaine's will wasn't just about the house and money. It was like she was telling me to be strong and make my own way. I decided to start over, use what Elaine left me to build something new for myself. The house, once a reminder of tough times, was now a place for new beginnings.